My name is Ryan. Here today with me are my co-hosts, Ms. Lisa Thomas and James Roska, who will be our presenter. I also have Ms. Pam Perez, who is our marketing manager from LA Sanitation Environment. So before we get into the presentation, please allow me to introduce Mr. James Roska. So James, he's going to talk about our city's organic waste recycling program. James studied chemical engineering at California State Polytechnic University, Pomona. Right after his graduation, he joined LASAN in 2016, so it's not too long ago, and he's currently serving as an environmental engineering associate in the solid resources division. James manages green waste collection, operation planning, and contracting from 750,000 single-family households and city facilities. That equals to about $2 to $3 million, 2 to 3 million residents of the city of Los Angeles. James also was a project engineer for food scrap disposal pilot program, as well as the food waste recycling program at Los Angeles International Airport. Today, James will talk about LASAN's effort to keep organic and food waste out of landfills and how we can transform that food waste into valuable resource. With that, please welcome Mr. James Roska. And James, I'm going to hand it over to you and start my share.
Great, thanks, Ryan. Let me just pull up my presentation now. Okay, can everyone see the full screen right now?
Yes.
We're good. Okay, great. Thank you again, Ryan, and thank you everyone for being here. Again, my name is James Roska. I work in our solid resources program, and I'm going to be discussing today specifically on organics and residential organic waste. For a little more background, again, Ryan already gave my bio, but I am the organics recycling program manager for the city on our Curbside program. And as an engineer and as a program manager, there are a lot of different roles and a lot of different hats that we put on, whether it's administrative, contractually, financially, planning, operations, data management. So many different aspects go into being an engineer and managing these programs. And I'm definitely going to get into some of those key specifics as I discuss the individual projects. We also get to do a lot of cool work doing pilot studies, site visits, launching new programs, attending conferences and research events. So there's a lot of interaction that LASAN and engineers for the city of LA, because we are such a large city and leader in the nation, get to be able to participate in. These are just a couple of photos that I have from over the years attending conferences, launching community events and community projects, conducting site visits. So these are all the types of things that you could expect being an engineer with LASAN. So as we discussed today, waste and organic waste, we as a city have our own individual waste goals that are set by Mayor Eric Garcetti and our council through LA's Green New Deal. The first and overarching goal is to become a zero waste city. Our goal is to divert 90% of all of our waste from landfills by the year 2025, 95% by 2035, and to be 100% diverted from landfills by the year 2050. So that is what the Solid Resources Program is working to achieve. As it relates to my program specifically, organic waste, our goal is to eliminate all organic waste going to landfills by the year 2028, and achieving those through implementing different projects, research programs, and kind of policies and development throughout the city as it relates to food waste collection, recycling, and food rescue and donation. Apart from individual city goals, we are also required to follow various state mandates and requirements. If you live in California, you may be familiar with SB 1383. This is kind of the largest overarching and encompassing regulation as it relates to organic waste. And it's been implemented in many cities throughout this past year with the implementation of the legislation. So this legislation has similar goals to the ones we already have set in our own city goals, achieving reduction of organic waste by the year 2025, increasing food rescue, and then addressing all of these different material types that are incorporated under the definition of organic waste. So to kind of give you a visual of what all of these different commodities or materials mean, LASAN is responsible for collection on the Curbside program, and we do also oversee our commercial recycling. On the residential program, we provide 750,000 households with weekly service for their blue bin, green bin, black bin, and brown bin. And all of this collection, operations planning, and contracting is managed by engineers like myself in our solid resources program. In addition to that, we have many other supplementary programs to address waste, such as bulky item collection, dead animal collection and rendering, waste tire recycling, electronic waste, household hazardous waste, textiles, and so many other programs that we're doing on kind of a mobile basis, as needed basis, or on a pilot basis. As I mentioned, LASAN is responsible for the single family collection, and we dispose approximately 1 million tons per year of material. And then similarly, LASAN oversees our commercial franchise, also known as LASAN. This is a program where the city has designated specific waste haulers to handle the commercial accounts to make sure that recycling programs, organic waste programs, and solid waste is uniform across the city and transparent in terms of numbers, tonnage, cost, and basically the effectiveness of the program. And on the commercial side, they dispose of approximately 1.5 million tons per year. So you can see that there's about 2.5 million tons disposed per year, with the remainder of the material being collected through blue bin and green bin for recycling and other programs. I wanted to show you an overview of what still currently ends up in the trash. This is a waste characterization study that was conducted at Sunshine Canyon landfill. This is the largest landfill in LA that we bring our material to. And you can see that they actually did a physical sort of the material that was going to the landfill and characterized it by its type. Paper, traditional recyclables, and then of course, for my conversation today, we're discussing organics. Organic waste includes food, textiles, green waste, yard waste, paper, and that makes up about 56% of what still ends up in the trash. So our goal in Solids is to implement programs and provide education and resources to get that material out of the black bin and into better beneficial reuse. So the first way we do that, you would imagine, I mentioned that I work on the actual bin collection program, but we at Sanitation try and focus first on before the bin programs. This is outreach and education, teaching residents resources for how to produce less waste in the first place, making them mindful of their waste habits and waste generation, and giving them tips and tricks for how to reduce waste from happening in the first place, whether that's meal planning, understanding date labels, food storage, and just understanding of their consumption and habits. The next tier we have is food rescue and reuse. Right, we wouldn't want material to go into a bin if, let's say, food is still healthy, able to be eaten, and especially when there's such a large demand and need for food to be rescued and given to those in need. And then lastly, home and local composting. If we can use our resources locally, rather than having them collected through the bin and then shipped off to contracted facilities, that's also a key focus that we're working on in our solids program, as well as through kind of local partnerships, as well as our biodiversity and healthy soils program. So when I talk about food rescue, as I mentioned before, on our commercial side, we have our Recycla program where we have our designated waste haulers that work with commercial businesses. They are contractually required to provide outreach to businesses and actually partner with local nonprofits to promote food rescue and donation. The Recycla service providers are required to share this information with all of the businesses that they service that generate food and have excess edible food, as well as to provide funding to local nonprofits and other food rescue organizations, whether it's through direct funding, providing them resources such as trucking, refrigeration, or other in-kind services. Through our Recycla program since January 2018, the Recycla service providers have funded about $2.5 million to support local nonprofits and food rescue organizations, and have rescued approximately 35 million meals worth of rescued food that was then distributed and provided back to the community. As I mentioned, our next step is keeping composting local, and that can be done both at home and through the local community. LASAN has hosted backyard composting workshops for over 20 years, first starting at our Lopez Canyon and Griffith Park location, and then most recently in the past 3 years, expanding to additional nature centers and wetland parks, including South LA and Gaffey Nature Center down in the harbor. So LASAN is just continuing to provide resources where residents can learn to do backyard composting, urban gardening, healthy soil, and other resources that they can do to basically decrease the amount of food waste that they're producing, keep it out of the bin, and keep those local resources within their own neighborhood and communities. Similarly, LASAN has been working on a program to do community composting at community gardens, local community spaces such as schools and churches, as well as working at farmers markets. We saw a model where residents were able to drop off food scraps at farmers markets where they were already doing their shopping for their weekly produce and goods, and basically having that as kind of a resource or a hub for residents to be able to drop off their food scraps, pick up new food, and then have those food scraps be turned into compost to then replenish the soil and kind of close that loop. LASAN is working with a local nonprofit called LA Compost, who is already doing this type of work in this space. And we're working to launch additional farmers market collection programs throughout the city. Another cool thing about this is that through this project, we were actually able to receive funds from a national grant by the USDA, as well as some additional funds that were provided by our Board of Public Works. So we have almost $1 million going into funding this type of work to expand these community composting hubs, farmers market drop-off locations, and increasing community composting within the LA region. So now I'm going to shift gears into the actual bin program. As I mentioned, I'm the program manager for our green bin as well as our brown bin. And we collect on average 1,600 tons per day of yard waste and horse manure. Our program has been going for over 20 years, where residents have been able to curb recycle their grass, leaves, weeds, and tree branches, fruits and vegetables from their gardens, wood, as well as horse manure for those residents that have horses on their private stables. But as I mentioned, from SB 1383 and our own organic waste goals, food waste and food scraps are kind of that next piece of the puzzle that we're looking to solve. We do have current pilot programs that we're working on for collecting food scraps and allowing residents to put food scraps into their bin, as well as those other various projects that I've already mentioned to allow residents more means of recycling and diverting their food waste away from the landfill. So I'm going to talk about kind of a specific pilot project that we looked at to expand the collection curbside, as well as kind of the steps taking a project from a pilot phase to a full implementation. So this pilot project was called Curb Your Food Waste LA. You can see it's a little bit of a pun because curb decreasing your food waste, but curb because we're collecting it right at your curbside. We launched this program back in 2019 to 18,000 households throughout the city. LA is a very large city, so we wanted to make sure that we hit every council district, every socioeconomic neighborhood, and do a lot of research gathering and information gathering on how different communities respond to our outreach and education, respond to education on the program, as well as measure their participation. Through this program, we educated residents on all of those tips and tricks I kind of mentioned before, how to prevent food waste, how to properly recycle your food scraps, how to do backyard composting or community composting if you have the means to, and then finally providing them with the bin as a program that they can use to divert food scraps at home. As you can see on the right, this is outreach material that was printed and then attached to these little kitchen countertop pails. And this is what residents can use to collect their food scraps throughout the week and then commingle those food scraps with their yard waste in the green bin for their regular weekly collection. Through this program, we contracted the services through a private consultant. So that's also a really exciting thing about doing work with the city is we both do projects in-house as well as get to work with private consultants and kind of, pick their brains for their expertise and to allow them to give us additional technical support. So we also get experience doing program management, working with, contractors and vendors who do work for us. Additionally, they also worked with local nonprofits and community organizations to do the work through this program. So a lot of the door-to-door work, surveying, waste characterization, knocking on neighborhood houses to distribute these pails was done through local nonprofits and community organizations. And then additionally, the technical aspect, analyzing the data, taking quarterly measurements, seeing how much food waste was being moved from the green bin into the black bin, and kind of being able to make decisions based off of that and kind of inform how we'll take this program from a pilot phase of 18,000 households to a fully expanded program citywide to 750,000. So as I mentioned, this pilot was started in 2019. So we did our research and data gathering over the course of 2 years. We brought our findings back to our management to kind of inform the direction we would move in. And then we were instructed to then take it from pilot to full execution. So our new program, OrganicsLA, that's kind of our overarching term we're using for all of our organics program, is then expanding now to a full citywide program. We started our first phase in July of this year, expanding from those 18,000 households that were already in the program and bringing on an additional 22,675 households in our north central area of the city. And we did all of this time, the work in-house rather than bringing on a consultant. Our crew is already very familiar with all of the routes, all of the Pail distribution, working with residents one-on-one directly. So we really wanted this outreach effort to be an in-house work. So we started back in July of this year and then completed in August. So over the course of a month, we went door to door over multiple weekends, reaching these 22,675 households and getting them signed up into the program. So our role as engineers overseeing this project is really all of the routing, the mapping, figuring out the logistics and the data gathering, as well as working with our own operations crew to basically come up with the plan to get out there in the field, as well as working with our administrative support and our GIS support to create these maps and come up with the schedules and timelines. So you'll see from this photo, the actual boots on the ground kitchen pail distribution. We had, as I mentioned, our own LASAN crew, as well as help from some friendly faces, including Mayor Eric Garcetti, our director, Barbara Romero, council member Mitch O'Farrell, as well as members from our Board of Public Works come out over multiple weekends and do this door-to-door distribution. Me and my team were out there in the field as well, kind of tracking all of the routes, seeing how the distribution was going on a day-to-day basis, as well as addressing resident questions and concerns as we were distributing the materials and educating them on the program. As I mentioned, there's always data and information that then goes into implementing these projects. So our GIS specialists actually came up with a distribution app that we were using out in the field to log every single household that we distributed this program to, and solicit responses from households that were home, that had questions about the program. For those homes that we weren't able to deploy a bin app, what was the reason? Was the resident not home? Were we not able to access the property? And kind of compile all of this information so we can then continue to roll out the program in the most efficient way possible. And then lastly, the other step that goes into implementing these programs. As I mentioned, we work with contractors and facilities who do a lot of our work. We handle the collection of the organic waste, but at the end of the day, most of the material we send or that we collect is treated and processed by private vendors. So we as engineers are then also responsible for the actual contracts and the work with those vendors. I most recently, over the course of this last year, led a team to review some proposals that were submitted by multiple vendors who are trying to get these long-term contracts to process all of this material. And going through that work is, reading all of the technical requirements submitted by the vendors, conducting site visits and reviewing their facility plans, checking their OSHA history, making sure that they're safe operators, they don't have any issues, whether it comes to labor or safety, and then just making sure that the vendors that we want to work with are really the partners we're going to have for these long-term 5, 10, 15-year contracts. Additionally, as engineers, you probably wouldn't imagine this, but we actually write the contracts ourselves. So we are working in conjunction with contract administration, city attorney, financial analysts and managers, risk managers of the city to actually write the terms of these contracts and make sure that, of course, these vendors are giving the services that we want and need, but also making sure that the city's interests are protected, whether that's from our ratepayer dollars or just safety and operation of any of these facilities. And then Lastly, the most important thing when it comes to executing any of these projects is getting approval by our elected officials. So we under sanitation report to the Board of Public Works. So we as engineers report these programs, report these contracts to the board and get the authority to do this scope of work. And then depending on the term and the dollar amount, then also going to full city council for authorization to do these projects. So that was kind of a pretty high level overview of the different types of hats that you'll wear as an engineer in sanitation. And whether it's in the organics program, solid waste, wastewater, stormwater, these are all the types of things that you can expect being an engineer with sanitation. And with that, I think I'm a little bit early, but I wanted to give some time for people to pick my brain with questions. So I think with that, I'll turn over to Ryan and everyone if there's any questions from the group.